Okay, this is going to be interesting. This is my first time on this platform, so we'll see how it goes. All right, so hello, my name is Chris. I am the head of data science at Quora, and I'm going to be talking to you about expanding the data scientist toolkit. All right, so to explain a little bit so that you understand what I'm talking about later, I just have a few things I want to go over in terms of background. Starting with what is Quora? So Quora is a knowledge sharing website. One of the basic actions is there are people all around the world. They have questions. They can ask them on Quora. And then some other Quora user will see their question and hopefully be able to give a good answer to that question. And then that answer is available to everyone in the future. So if you do a Google search, maybe you'll find it, or you can search for it on Quora's website, or we have a feed of content that we think is interesting, and maybe we'll show you that answer there. And we also have this other feature where people can build what we call a space, which is about a specific type of knowledge. And so you can aggregate all kinds of knowledge in that one specific space. And to see what that looks like, on the right, here's a question someone asked about what books a data scientist should read, and then I gave an answer. All right. So the next important question when talking about data science is what kind of data science we are talking about. Because data science means a lot of different things at different companies. So data scientist at Quora means more what might be called product analytics. That means our mission as data scientists is to help Quora make as many good decisions as possible. And to be a little bit more refined about that, it's not really the number of questions we answer, but it's how much value we get out of them. So it's kind of like expected value over time of the changes in decisions because Quora data science was there. And so in that definition, two things are important. One, we need to be fast so we can answer many questions. And two, we need to cover as many questions as possible. And most of what Quora data scientists do uses a small set of tools that you're probably familiar with, right? So Quora has all kinds of tables and logs, and then we use a bunch of standard tools for manipulating that data. So like SQL-languages like Presto and Redshift, statistical tools like pandas, and then Quora also has built its own tools on top of all of this to visualize data and to analyze experiments. But sometimes these tools can't answer our questions. The most prominent reason is we just don't have the data. It's about something that is external to Quora that is still relevant to Quora. Or a path to that answer is just not available in code, right? It captures some kind of intuitive concept, but you're not going to be able to write a machine learning model or SQL to get it accurately. And when these things happen, the Quora data team doesn't say it's impossible. We try very hard to find another way. And so that's the topic of this talk. I'm going to give you 3 methods that you can kind of use in your jobs to answer questions when the standard tools fail. So the first method is to use someone else's data, right? So here's a question that Quora is interested in. How much search traffic is there by language? And of course, Google knows this, right? They have all the data they need to answer this question, but they're not telling anyone. However, if you do Google searches for other people's data, you'll start to get a few things, right? You can get the number of web pages by language. That's starting to get at the right answer, but it's not quite right. Not all web pages are used equally, and this matters. And then you can also find internet population by language. But again, this is an imperfect measure of what we care about because not everyone uses the internet equally much. So the best answer we came up with, someone on my team found, was to use Wikipedia's data, right? So Wikipedia publishes data about how many visits they get by language, right? And this is actually seems like a pretty good proxy for search traffic by language. And is this the perfect answer? No, obviously it's not. But on the plus side, it was an answer that was very easy to get. And furthermore, if you think about it, given what Wikipedia is and what Quora is, we're both trying to like share and grow knowledge. This might actually be a better answer than if I just looked at Google's search traffic numbers. You obviously can't expect perfection, but perfection's not really the goal here. You just want to be, significantly better off than you would be if you were guessing. And kind of as a refinement to this, if this is really important, you might search for other websites' data if they have this available, if they're relevant to what your website's trying to do, and then maybe you could just like take an average of all the different answers you get, and probably that will be even better. And there are some other kinds of other people's data you can use. So it turns out that there are lots of companies that will accumulate data of their own and will sell it to you, right? And this is kind of something that data scientists don't think about a lot. Like, they might try to do something complicated, but someone has already done it. So one good example of this is, phone and tablet device specifications. I don't know if you're aware, but there are like tens of thousands of different mobile devices that someone could be accessing the internet with. And yeah, you might be able to accumulate all this data yourself, but there are people who have already done it for you, and their data will be better, and they'll have already dealt with all the issues you might find yourself dealing with. Another example is market research, right? So you want to know things like how many notifications get sent out on the internet, how do people respond to them, Nielsen ratings are a type of this thing. And like all of this data is something you can get without having to do a lot of work. When you do this, it's important to be skeptical. If you can't get the answer, you might wonder how they got it and where the flaws in their methodology is. But you should at least be open-minded. And another type of other people's data is public disclosure documents. So publicly traded companies have all these different documents they have to send to their investors on a regular basis. Those documents often contain interesting statistics about the company and how it's doing. And sometimes you can use this kind of data to size potential opportunities in the market, right? So you can kind of like infer, well, this company makes this much money per thing they do in this market, so maybe we won't be as good at it, or maybe we think we can be better at it, and we can scale up or down and get ourselves an estimate of like how valuable some new thing we could be doing might be. All right, so example 2. So I talked about using other people's data. You should also use your own data. Okay, so what do I mean here? So one, if you're working on a product, you should be using it. And there are lots of standard reasons for this. One, it helps build product intuition. 2, it encourages empathy for your audience. But we're data scientists, and those aren't the real reasons we do it. We do it because it gives us a really great set of data we can understand and play with. The most natural application of this is trying to understand logging, right? So if you've ever worked with logging you didn't write yourself, I can guarantee you've dealt with logging that didn't work the way you expected it to. Furthermore, there's probably no documentation for the logging, and if it is, it was probably written when the person first wrote the logging and is now out of date. On the other hand, I guarantee you, if you do some stuff on your service and then look at the logs for it, that logging will represent at least what happened, how the logging worked yesterday. And many companies provide tools that make it very easy to look at your own logging. Mostly engineers know about them and use them, but if you're a data scientist, you should get familiar with them and use them yourself. And another kind of more interesting example, so you might want to vet some data set that's being built for your company. So many years ago, I was working at a company that had profile data for all of its users. This data had interest tags, so maybe it said you like cats and you like video games and you like data science. Then various activity metrics, so how many days did the user visit the site, how much money did they spend on various things on the site, and then just a whole long list beyond that. So I was at this job for a couple of weeks, and I had data for myself because I'd used this product, and I decided to look at what the product thought about me. And I looked at it, and it was wrong in a lot of ways. And when I went back and tried to debug what happened, I found out that it had been wrong in these ways for 6 months. This was a product that was, billions of dollars was going through every year. And the ways in which were wrong didn't completely break the product, but they were important enough that money was probably lost. So being able to have this one example and looking at it and saying, oh, this doesn't agree, made it very easy for me to identify these problems. All right, last example, something I call small data, because as data scientists, we're always about big data. So in April 2020, changes were going on how Quora was being used. And we wanted to know if we could relate them to the COVID-19 lockdown. Right, and there's a SQL approach to this. You can do counts of visits with certain keywords. You come up with like coronavirus and pandemic and maybe like 5 or 6 others. And you can just count the number of actions related to those keywords. And that's a good place to start. But if you did that, would you be able to find examples like these, right? What exactly does a life support system / ventilator do? Okay, well, maybe you knew enough to know ventilator was an interesting word related to Quora. Next one is a little harder. What are some of your favorite recipes using a sourdough starter? It turns out lots of people decided they were going to learn how to make sourdough bread during the lockdown. And then, lastly, how do people cheat on online proctored exams? Now, when you look at that last example, it's obvious that this is related to COVID-19, but you probably wouldn't have come up with it from first principles. So instead of that SQL query, here's what I recommend you do, right? Humans are smarter than regular expressions, so you as a human should evaluate a couple examples. So, I start a little spreadsheet. It has 4 columns. What question am I looking at? And 2 columns for how strongly I think it's related with COVID. And then just like a 4th column if I want to write any notes, right? And then I just look at a few hundred examples of randomly selected questions that were accessed. This will take a couple of hours. And it's a lot of time, but it's also pretty analogous to how much time you'd spend on some other analytics project. You're not going to get precision with a query like this because you're looking at a few hundred data points instead of millions. But you probably don't need it, right? If I said, 20% of our search traffic is related to COVID, and the real answer is 25%, probably doesn't matter. It's probably not going to change what we're going to do. And furthermore, if you do this, you're going to learn a lot of stuff along the way, right? You're going to look through all these questions, and you're going to come up with things you hadn't thought to ask about beforehand. Right? So maybe you'll think, oh, here's a good way to classify the various types of COVID traffic, and then I'll add another column and give some classification of the traffic there, right? So, other places where small data might be useful. How many ads does the average web page have? I can just look at a couple randomly selected web pages and build a little spreadsheet and describe all the different ads they have and how much space they take up and things like that. how good are our spam classifiers, right? Like spam's an important problem for all kinds of internet services. And you probably have an existing ML spam classifier, but it can't tell you how good it is. It doesn't know. It thinks it's right. But if you look at a few hundred examples, you can see how often it's missing and what kinds of stuff it's missing on. And what do memes look like on our site? This is a thing I actually did many years ago at Facebook when it started to have reshares and memes were starting to become a thing. I just identified with SQL a bunch of posts that were likely to be memes, and I just looked at a bunch of them and said, okay, here's qualitatively what memes are like on Facebook. So conclusion, data scientists, as defined at Quora, are meant to be experts on data. And it's important to not translate that into a specific set of data tools. So not just SQL, not just ML or whatever. And you shouldn't be afraid to use simple or less rigorous techniques to get what you need with data when those more defined techniques aren't available. What you really should just be doing is focusing on getting answers that are going to help you make better decisions. So thanks. That's my talk. I am now going to look inside the Q&A and see if there's any questions in there. There are not questions there. Maybe the questions are in chat. So I have a question from Felix. What does Quora do with the data, answers, and about those who answer they collect? We do many various things, but primarily our job with data is to make Quora as a product better. So a lot of what we do is we kind of try to figure out what answers are useful, what kinds of trends. We try to predict whether or not a given answer will be useful from a given person to another given user, right? That's the big problem is finding the right content for the right users. Are there any other questions people have? Are there questions in Q&A? No questions in Q&A. People want to ask questions in chat. Okay then. I guess we can end a little bit early. So Felix asks, so you access expertise. Well, not in a formal sense. We don't we don't have an opinion about this person is an expert on this thing necessarily. But we do build a model over time of how well received and how useful a person's answers are going to be. We do a lot of other things too. That's just kind of one example. Okay then. I think I will wrap up there. And people, one more. All right, now I'm getting lots of questions. How do you determine when to data mine versus when to do something more manual, i.e. reading through posts? I mean, I think it's just a matter of how much, you look at 4 or 5 different models of how you could do this. You decide how accurate each one's going to be, how much time it's going to take you, and then also figuring in is how important the question is. I might be willing to spend a week answering one question. I might only be willing to spend an hour answering another question. That hour-long question is just not as important. So Jeet asked what kind of tools do you use regularly, and I think I kind of already answered that in the talk, so you can look at the slides, and we're out of time. So I'll close up here. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful.